Now, this is the second part of the webinar that covers dietary balances, and specifically this covers vitamins and minerals. Now, a lot of this you have already covered in biochemistry, so it's more of a review. So I'm going to kind of go over the main things that I want you to remember. And pretty much everything that I'm about to say is in your manual. So I'm just going to tell you where to focus. You should be able to tell me the differences between vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are organic. Minerals are inorganic. That's a definitive. You must know that difference. When you look at vitamins, though, you learn in biochemistry about ones that are that we don't necessarily require from our diet as long as we produce them sufficiently. For example, vitamin D, it's not going to be considered something that we need to take in our diet if we get enough sunlight, because we make vitamin D in our own bodies. And just the main reason why most people are deficient in vitamin D is we don't get exposure to enough sunlight. So if you do not get enough exposure to sunlight, yes, you definitely need to ingest vitamin D. Now, the requirements for various vitamins and minerals depend on the person, and you get body size, how old you are, if you're pregnant, the amount of exercise you have. That's more for a nutrition class, so I'm not going to cover those. You should also make sure you know the difference between the fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble ones includes D, A, E, and K. And then you got the water-soluble ones, which include all your B complex, folate, which is a B vitamin, vitamin C. All of those are water-soluble. When you look at the storage of vitamins, in the lecture on the liver as an organ, we did cover briefly about where we store some of our vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are stored predominantly, we have extensive stores of the fat-soluble ones in the liver. A, you got about 5-10 months supply. Vitamin D, we got a 2 or 4 month supply. Now, the one that's kind of unique is usually when you think about water-soluble vitamins, we don't store those. But we have a really good store of vitamin B12 in our livers also. So that's kind of an exception. Now, when you look at the vitamins, you have them in your notes. The vitamins, if you look at your notes, you've got all the vitamins. I've listed the main things it's used for, and in some cases I've put in conditions that result from a deficiency in that particular vitamin. So you should review those, and it's stuff that you've heard before, so it's not going to be that much extra work for you. Because some of the stuff I've talked about, like berry, I talked about in in Physiology 1, so you know that's a thiamine deficiency. So I'm going to require that you, for the various vitamins, be able to tell me what its predominant thing it's used for, and maybe a condition that results from a deficiency in that particular vitamin. The fat-soluble ones, the same thing. Main thing it's used for, and there I've listed them in your notes. And if I've listed it in bolded, if I'm deficient in a particular vitamin, what could it result in? Now, I can guarantee you, I would definitely probably ask you about vitamin D and vitamin K, since you've heard that in other lectures. We've talked about vitamin D in multiple lectures. Vitamin K we discussed when we did coagulation. So I definitely would make sure you remember those. The other ones, I may or may not ask you, okay? But you should review it because it's part of your boards for the chemistry boards. Now, if you look at the minerals, now the minerals are inorganic. They can be classified as electrolytes. You'll see like sodium, potassium, chloride. Those are the ions that we talked about dissolved in our body fluids. You've got what we call the minerals, and those are required in fairly large quantities. You've got the trace minerals, which you need in trace amounts, smaller quantities, and the ultra trace minerals, which you need in very, very small amounts. Now, what I'm going to focus on for you for the purposes of this topic on dietary balances is the minerals versus the trace minerals. You should know which are considered to be minerals and which are considered to be trace minerals. And then of them, the ones that I'm most likely are going to ask you would be calcium, because we've talked about that in multiple lectures. I've talked about iodine. We talked about thyroid hormone production. Those ones I predominantly ask more about. So I'm more likely going to ask you about iodine and more likely to ask you about calcium, but it's a good idea to review the others because, again, it's part of your chemistry boards. So I would recommend you at least review it and just kind of like read through it. But I'm more likely to ask you which are considered minerals, which are considered trace minerals, and more likely ask you anything about calcium or iodine. So that's pretty much all you have to do for this part of the lecture.